Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. An academic who opposes critical race theory has been turned away from an education conference over concerns that she threatens the psychological safety of other speakers. Alka Sehgal Cuthbert, director of Don't Divide Us, was to speak this weekend at the Rethinking Education conference in London. But they didn't like that. People complained, said they made her feel unsafe, and that was the end of that. So Alka Sehgal Cuthbert joins me now. Welcome to the show. So Alka,
thank you.
You're obviously a very dangerous, frightening person.
As you can see.
As I can see. So you were there as your role as an educator with an awful lot of experience and qualifications to speak on a panel. What was the panel about?
The panel was going to be discussing indoctrination in education and what can schools do to avoid it.
OK. Now...
Ironically.
Yeah, so isn't this an example of what you were going to be talking about, this kind of mentality?
Well, that would have come up in it for sure.
Yes.
I mean, it was the other panellists are educators themselves, an academic, a very respected philosopher of education and a tutor in a sixth form college, and myself.
Yes.
You know, out of a conference with many sessions on all sorts of things, I would say this was probably the most intellectually and politically challenging session, and exactly the one that teachers and educators need to be engaging with. So I'm very saddened that it didn't go ahead.
And what is it about your views that make people feel unsafe? What is it that you believe?
OK, so, well, you know, it is a bit ironic, you know, a kind of a company called Rethinking Education, led by two white directors, disinvite me, a woman of colour, who argues that not all white people are racist. So that's a little bit odd, but there you go. What it is they felt that they've never met me. There were 7 anonymous people here, and I think it's a bit shameful on them, really, that they haven't come public on this, not even to offer support to the organiser that stood up for them.
Yes.
But please come public if you want to. Sorry, what was your question?
Well, they effectively said that... Well, because it's so ridiculous, I'm not surprised.
What they objected to.
What do they object to?
Well, the central tenets of Don't Divide Us, the two main things are we don't believe Britain is structurally racist, and we don't think that, you know, people fall into white privilege, black oppression, oppressor victim thing, right?
Yeah.
And obviously that has implications for schooling and education, because we don't believe that schools should be teaching those ideas as if they were facts.
Like critical race theory, those sort of contested theories, basically.
So, you know, now, the fact is, this is really much more about race, and it's much more than just me being cancelled or, you know, the James Mannion feeling discomforted. This is about how those tenets are majority views, right?
Yes.
Poll after poll shows a majority of people do not agree with us. They do not think Britain is structurally racist, and they don't agree that that should be taught as fact to children in schools. So when they cancelled me, they weren't just denying the other 473 people at the conference a chance to hear that debate.
Yes.
They were actually siding with an aspect of an ideology that is seeking to delegitimise majority public opinion.
Yes.
That has huge democratic implications, right? Because it's
a discussion we need to be having, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
And you've made clear in your writing before that racism is something we must tackle, we must stand up against.
Absolutely. You know, of course I would.
Yeah.
You know, it's you know, if you're in a school and you think there's racism, you are morally, ethically, politically, professionally bound to address that.
Yes.
What you are not morally, ethically, politically, professionally bound to do is to accept the claims without reasons given.
Yes.
For making a huge assertion that stigmatises the beliefs of a whole majority of people as if that were fact. You know,
what does it do to the kids, though? I mean, I've got a teacher friend. They said a visiting speaker came in, took all the black children out, just by looking at them, decided who she would take out, and then took them to a room to explain to them how they'll always be oppressed, and they were effectively being oppressed by their white friends.
Yeah.
They didn't react well. The kids didn't enjoy this. What does it do?
No. Well, I mean, you know, I think children will have different reactions to that. My main concern is more what it does to the adults.
Right.
Right. Because when this is introduced, you know, what has happened here is that James Mannion has presented the dilemma he was faced when he was...
He's the director of the conference.
He's the director. He was faced with 7 anonymous complainants who were visibly shaking at the thought of having to share a space with me.
Yes.
And he then had to make a decision, right? He had to decide whether to believe them,
yes,
or gently talk them through, like you would a child, that there was no objective reason to fear me.
Yes.
They didn't have to come into the same room as me if they didn't want to. But, maybe, actually the way of overcoming fear is to engage, in controlled environment, which a public
yes.
event is, with ideas that you disagree with.
They don't mean it, do they? They don't really feel unsafe by your presence.
No,
sure.
I mean, I'm going to give a good faith reading of that. I don't know. I mean, it could be that they felt scared, or it could be that there was certainly, among the delegates and speakers, there are people who belong or are affiliated with groups that
yes.
we have criticised in our reports, right? So, but I don't know. I don't know who it was. I would welcome them. I really wish they would come public. I'd love to discuss with them.
Well, I would invite them on this show and we can have a discussion about this. Because,
that would be brilliant.
Because my instinct is that, if you complain to either an employer or someone organising an event like this and say, I don't like hearing different views, can you please ban the views I don't agree with? They'll say, no, we're not going to do that. But if you go in saying, I'm now unsafe,
yes.
then they have a kind of health and safety obligation to do something about it. Feels like a tactic.
Well, there isn't, even if it's not even a health and safety thing, we just heard Ella Whelan on talking about the psychological arguments used. But you see, those safeguarding protection arguments, they apply to interactions between adults and children, right? We are adults, we are equal citizens. So what is happening here is, and you are morally autonomous, that's a central tenet of Don't Divide Us. What is happening here is that there is an informal pressure being exerted to treat us as if to be good, you have to be morally compliant.
Yes.
And that is the real authoritarian kernel at the heart of this. So I would really urge anybody in James Mannion's situation, in senior leadership in schools or on, management teams in business places, if you feel that pressure from people within your workplace, I'm not saying disregard it, but I'm saying you really have to apply your reason to it and not be swayed by an emotional reaction. Because what James did, and, I feel sorry for him in many ways, but the problem isn't a logistical one of how you're going to fill in, people not turning up. The problem is a kind of a moral and a political one, and a kind of one of public responsibility.
There has been an apology today.
There has been an apology, yes, and accept that gratefully. But I really would press the point that, it's not just personal insult to me. It's not even possible, I don't know about defamation legally, but kind of delegitimising Don't Divide Us.
Yes.
It's not even the free speech within the context of that event. This is delegitimising popular public opinion.
Yeah.
That is authoritarian.
Very important. And finally, did they never consider the irony of, taking the only non-white person on the panel off? So you end up with an all-white panel for the sake of diversity.
Well, this is the authoritarian paradox of the EDI agenda. Is
yes.
Diversity means conformity. Equality means treating people unequally, and inclusion means exclusion.
OK. Well, Alka Sehgal Cuthbert, thanks very much for joining me. I should say that James Mannion, the conference organiser, did say in a statement, we've been contacted by 7 people, a combination of speakers and delegates, who communicated very clearly they would not feel safe to speak at or attend the conference alongside a representative of Don't Divide Us. When someone tells you they feel unsafe, you need to listen. But there has been an apology since. We should say there has been an apology since. Still to come on Free Speech Nation, the top social sensations that have gone viral this week. Please do not go anywhere.